begin our time together officially. I've noted that the transcript has begun. I have very few preliminary comments, except I do want to repeat what I was able to announce at our Finance and Achievement Committee yesterday, and that is that our Vice Chair, Emily Simnett, has agreed to chair the Finance and Achievement Subcommittee, which is it will be, I think, a great help to all of us, but especially to me. And so I'm grateful to you for that, Commissioner Simnett, and will, I think, help us to cover some very important work in that area, better than me trying to handle both of those. So I appreciate that. We do have, now let's see, a lot of stuff to cover in this meeting, and so I appreciate your being here, and we'll proceed. Lisa, could you call the roll, please?
Yes, Chair. Thank you. Commissioner Heeman.
Present.
Commissioner Simnett.
Present.
Commissioner Arnott. Commissioner Devlin.
Present.
Commissioner Edwards. Commissioner Fajardo.
Present.
Commissioner Coker. Commissioner Martinez.
Present.
Here.
Commissioner Jen Proctor Andrews. Commissioner Middleton. Commissioner Rowe.
Present.
Commissioner Smith.
Present.
Commissioner Yamasaki. We have a quorum, Chair. The roll is complete.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Appreciate that. With that, we'll go forward with our first action item, which is the approval of the June and July full commission meeting minutes. Hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at those, and if you have any questions before you vote to approve those.
I move to approve the minutes for June and July.
Thank you so much.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of approving the minutes? I think I don't know if this is formally appropriate, but it looks like for both June and July, please indicate your approval. Some form.
Aye.
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 Any disapproval? That's probably what I need to make note of. None. Good. Well, thank you. We have approved the minutes from our past two meetings. And again, I'll just remind you, if you are on, would you please turn on your camera so I can see you and appropriately acknowledge you when when you have questions or are participating. So with that, I'll turn it over to our Executive Director, Ben Cannon, who provides his monthly update and other reports.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll begin just to get it out of the way by noting that you do have within your packets a report on our budget relative to spending through the close of the biennium or thereabouts. I'm happy to take any questions or refer them to our operations director and CFO, Tom Reel. To move into the more substantive portion of my report, I'll just reflect on the past couple of months since our June meeting by noting that for me, and I think for other members of our team at the agency, this period of the summer following the long legislative session is one of sort of consolidation of the legislative activity that'll be reflected in Kyle's report later this morning, reflection on sort of where we are as a state and as a commission and agency in the work, and planning for the work ahead. And so a good chunk of my report this morning and the discussion we'll have both with Kyle and then in connection with the strategic plan will focus on work that is to come, and really excited about that. The reflective portion of the last couple of months for me has included my annual meeting with colleagues from around the country, other higher education executive officers. As you'll recall, we are a member of the State Higher Education Executive Officers Association, or SHEO. And on an annual basis in July, I get together with other SHEOs from around the nation. About 35 to 40 were represented at DC at our meeting in July, and spent a lot of time hearing from other states about their work. Sessions this year included one on the evolving role of SHEOs in workforce development, data-driven strategies for student success, strengthening rural higher education, along with many other topics. I presented on panels with counterparts, one with counterparts from Florida, Ohio, who are also, like me, former legislators turned SHEOs. And so we spent a really enjoyable hour and a half sharing that experience with our SHEO colleagues, and especially given the amount of work that we all do with legislators. That was really enjoyable and well received. Also participated on a panel with colleagues from Kentucky and again Ohio, and this was and a moderator talking about the role of state systems in strengthening American democracy. And I'll say come back to that topic briefly at the end of our report. Finally, that conference also included the opportunity to hear from Education Secretary McMahon, Linda McMahon, and then in a small group with the Executive Committee of the Association, we had a pretty substantive conversation with the Deputy Undersecretary for the Department of Education, James Bergeron, and explained and shared some of the concerns that and challenges that we are experiencing as states relative to some of the federal action on higher ed. That SHEO annual meeting corresponds with a policy conference that SHEO puts on for a much larger group, over 500 folks who come from around the country, including from agencies like ours, that's occurring now this week in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And so Amy Cox and Kyle Thomas, and Jennifer Purcell, Jim Pinkard, and several other HECC staff are at that conference now. And again, sessions there that mirror and expand upon the types of topics that I mentioned are discussed at the annual meeting. So again, a really great opportunity for us at the agency to take stock, learn from other states, get some inspiration, build some relationships, and hopefully bring some of that back in the support that we provide to you and to our partners in this work. I'm going to stick with the federal piece of this for a couple of minutes because it remains very active and uncertain time, and I guess dynamic time relative to federal policy budgets and higher education and workforce development. And we are continuing at the agency to work through several specific challenges that have resulted from direction from federal agencies or from the White House, some of which are being litigated by the state of Oregon, along with other states. I won't get into all of that. I will note, it's one very serious example of this was the substantial delay in funding that HECC experienced relative to related to the Workforce and Innovation Opportunity Act Title II dollars, which states received to support adult basic education. We spent a couple of months this summer quite anxious and concerned that funding, which had been appropriated by Congress and supports, again, adult education at community colleges, was not being delivered on time by the U.S. Department of Education. very relieved within the last couple of weeks that funding has been released, and so we are able to make those grants as expected to community colleges for their Title II programs. So grateful to have that back on track. We have a web page. We have a page within our website that provides sort of latest information, public information on federal updates, and so encourage folks to check that out if they're interested in other federal actions that have affected the HECC and the status of that activity. Again, sticking with federal action, but turning to Congress, as you are aware, in early July, Congress passed and the president signed H.R. 1, or the One Big Beautiful Bill, the Reconciliation Bill, several of the names that it is known by. This is a huge piece of legislation that has enormous implications for the country and for higher education. You may have seen that earlier this week, the governor announced the results of her and the chief financial office's assessment of state impacts on federal revenues to states, to the state of Oregon, because of changes in the bill. And that estimate is quite sobering. It showed that Oregon expects reduced federal revenues of approximately $1 billion in the current biennium, around $6 billion in the 27-29 billion biennium, and $8 billion in the biennium to follow. The vast majority of this impact, this reduced federal revenue to the state of Oregon, is the result of changes to the food assistance program, SNAP, and reductions to Medicaid. Unquestionably, that those reductions will put pressures on state budgets, Oregon's budget, as lawmakers consider whether to try to backfill some of that reduced support for Oregonians. And, higher education has historically experienced those types of broader pressures on state budgets, has felt that very acutely as one of the state's other sort of one of the other discretionary components of state budgets. Those estimates that I just mentioned that were announced earlier this week are separate from the nearly $1 billion in general fund revenue that Oregon is currently projecting it will see reduced in the current biennium as a result of tax changes, federal tax changes that Oregon is linked to through our tax code that would affect Oregon general fund revenues, unless the state takes steps to decouple or otherwise change its tax code. So the combination of this, again, is quite, I think, concerning for public services in Oregon generally, certainly the current biennium and the next several. We expect there will be a revenue forecast in late August 27th, that will provide greater clarity about the status of Oregon's revenues for the current biennium, and then projections out over the next couple. But I think the consensus is that is likely to be a challenging forecast for Oregon, notwithstanding the fact that we just adopted our budgets for this biennium a couple of months ago. Let me say a few more words about the reconciliation bill, H.R. 1, and its impacts on higher education specifically. I've heard some describe this bill, which certainly is not primarily a higher education bill, as nevertheless being sort of as consequential as a Higher Education Reauthorization Act, which Congress has not passed in over a decade. But nevertheless, this bill contains substantial provisions, policy changes to higher ed. Start with the Pell Grant program, where generally, positive news here. The Pell Grant program the existing Pell Grant program is mostly unchanged by H.R. 1, and some may recall that there were earlier versions of this bill that would have made major changes and cuts to the existing Pell Grant program. Those were not included in the final version of the bill that passed. And in fact, the bill reduces the federal funding shortfall for Pell, which is a positive. It also creates a new workforce Pell program to support students enrolled in certain short-term training programs that today are not eligible for Pell Grants. This has long been a priority for community colleges and others that have sought to make more students eligible for the Pell Grant for short-term training programs. Under the language that passed Congress, states have an important role to play in determining which short-term programs will be eligible for the new Workforce Pell Grant. That responsibility is assigned to governors, advised by state workforce boards. So we expect that the HECC and the WTDB will be heavily involved over the next year in determining which short-term training programs become eligible for the new Pell Grant program, and we'll be working closely with the governor's office in making those determinations. That program is set to come online a year from now for students starting in the fall of 2026. The reconciliation bill also establishes new loan limits for the federal lending system. Won't get into the details. They are particularly likely to affect graduate students. Many are concerned that this will push more student borrowers into the private market, where those loans are typically more expensive than they are under the federal system. Finally, the bill has a very interesting provisions around institutional accountability. Institutions, in order to continue to participate in the federal financial aid system, programs would have to show that their graduates, their completers, are earning more than, for undergraduate completers, that they're earning more than high school graduates within the same region. Likewise, for graduate completers, that they're earning more than those without graduate degrees. This is a complex and technical project that will require a lot of data and take several years to unfold, but could have consequences for Oregon programs. So a lot in the federal space, and happy to come back to any of that if there are questions. Just a couple of more items I want to cover. Note, in addition to the SHIO meetings, have had the pleasure of spending time with our college and university presidents, both at the retreats, at both of their retreats of the public university presidents in Eugene and the community college presidents on Mount Hood. Really good discussions, and really have appreciated getting to spend time in a sort of casual setting, having conversations about all of this and more. Would like to share that the Oregon Council of Presidents, which has represented the Oregon Public University Presidents, is undergoing a name change and will be referred to going forward as the Coalition of Oregon Public Universities. And I can certainly report from both groups that there is such a high level of commitment among the presidents of our public universities to working really closely and collaboratively with each other, with having a strong relationship with this commission and this agency. And also appreciate just a really, I think, clear-sighted recognition of the challenges that our sector faces, from enrollment and demographic changes to the federal pressures and dynamics within the state that are unique to Oregon as well, both opportunities and challenges. And I see amongst the presidential leadership today a really just clear-eyed and honest recognition of the challenges and opportunities that we have. Final couple of notes from my report, and as I said, we'll talk later this morning about new and changed activity in connection with the strategic plan that you adopted last year, and sort of how that is unfolding in terms of work at the agency. In addition to the items on that list that we'll cover under that I'll discuss under 7.0, I want to note some areas of activity that are either already underway or planned that don't show up there because in some cases they're sort of long-standing, or in other cases they don't fit neatly within the strategic plan categories, but nevertheless are pretty important and want to be on your radar. One is a report that we will produce and bring to the commission late this year on the efficiency of kind of operations at our public universities. This is in response to a budget note that is described in the legislative materials that you have from Kyle and that we'll look at later this morning. But that report that we are drafting and we'll be working closely with the public universities on is a major piece of work led by Jim Pinkard out of our Office of Post-Secondary Finance and Capital. And I just want to acknowledge that that is underway and will be coming to you later this year. A second sort of project that we hope to undertake and that we've made some requests around is to work with the Chief Financial Office and potentially the Legislative Fiscal Office as well to examine how the current service level is calculated for our community college and public university support funds. You'll recall perhaps that around a year ago, as we were putting together the agency request budget, we expressed some concern about the way those current service level calculations are made today, and we suggested that this is work we'd like to undertake with the executive branch and hopefully the legislative branch around this time. We are making great headway in our project to create a system of direct admissions for Oregon high school students into the colleges or universities for which they're eligible. I'm sure at some point this fall we'll be bringing forward a presentation or report on that, because I think it's really exciting that Oregon may be in a position to follow a handful of other states that are making this really seamless opportunity available for graduating high school students, and I'm really pleased that we got just a little bit of funding from the legislature to sustain this work in the current biennium, and we're getting a lot of participation from our college and university and K-12 partners in that. Just want to note the continuing work that we're doing with community colleges on developmental education redesign in anticipation of changes to how we fund DevEd in the upcoming biennium, and so that work continues to be important for us and for college leaders. You should know that we are also in the upcoming year, we are launching a review of our distribution formula for state funding to public universities. We call this the Student Success and Completion Model, or SSCM. And this is a really key tool that the HECC uses to sort of influence activity at our public universities through how we distribute state funding. And that review is called for in rule, and we'll be working really closely with a work group comprised primarily of public university representatives, facilitated by Jim Pinkard in our Office of Post-Secondary Finance and Capital to review that formula and make potential adjustments. That work will receive some direction from the Funding and Achievement Subcommittee. Final couple of items. We are gearing up for our biennial talent assessment. This will be launched in the fall and unveiled at our Talent Summit in 2026. Look for this to be a project kind of co-steered by the Commission, the HECC, and the Workforce Talent Development Board, and it is this biennial analysis of Oregon's talent needs, draws heavily from conversations with and surveys with employers, looking closely at our education and training systems, identifying gaps and opportunities for talent development going forward. So looking forward to engaging the Commission in that. And finally, I'll end on just returning to this, something I mentioned in connection with the SHIO meeting, which is the work that we are sort of dipping our toe into through our participation in a national coalition for civic learning and democratic engagement. The states and systems are undertaking this project in very different ways. I mentioned that I was on a panel with Ohio and Kentucky, very different environments that are thinking about infusing civic learning and democratic engagement into higher education in different ways. For us, as a coordinating commission here, our initial interest is in surveying our colleges and universities to understand how they are doing this work already, how students are experiencing civic learning and democratic engagement through their studies already. So look for that in the fall. And then we're also interested in exploring how civic learning and democratic engagement for students may be embedded within general education requirements that exist today or may exist in a more common framework in the years to come through some of our work around gen ed and transfer. So those are a couple of the opportunities that we see to advance those values through the commission's efforts in the years to come. And the very last thing I'll say is that after, gosh, I don't know, 5 or 6 years of the commission encouraging me to take a sabbatical at some point, given my now nearly 12 years in this position, I'll be on vacation starting Friday and going for about a month. This will represent the I guess the disconnect part of the sabbatical, the true sort of replenishment, because I won't be engaged in any particular professional learning or activity. This is truly the vacation portion of that. I'll be back around September 15th and fully back on the clock at that point, and then looking over the course of the year to do some additional kind of professional learning. But appreciate the commission's support for taking this rather long vacation, certainly much longer than any I've had, and excited for that and excited to come back in September with a new head of steam. So thanks for the attention. This was a longish report. I welcome any questions or comments.
Ben, thank you so much for an extremely full report. As you know, I'm perhaps especially excited about the last item, but I want to see if there are any questions or comments that commissioners might have. It's a lot of information in that report, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more on a variety of those issues, but if you have some questions right now. Ben, I have one. It's perhaps too early for this, but I'm sure you have this on your mind. The metric of sort of income benefit associated with Pell Grants for the future. I think I'm concerned about how we will address that in fields of study which are more service oriented and perhaps have benefits other than income. I'm just wondering how, starting to think ahead about, as people are moving to areas like early child development or things like that, where it's perhaps hard to demonstrate the kind of income advancement that metric might be seeking. Also wondering, as we move towards shorter and shorter term educational experience and certificating them, that might also create a challenge for us as well. So just something I'm starting to think about. And again, I'm absolutely confident that you've already thought of those, but it's just kind of something I want to keep in mind. It's going to be a challenging metric for some of our program areas. So.
Yeah, I know this is a national concern, and I guess I get a couple of words of sort of reassurance is that I think we're several years away from the U.S. Department of Education really being able to put together the data and the kind of tools to support this new requirement that Congress passed. Don't know what role states and state data may play in supporting that. The department has a lot of work if they're going to pull this off. But yes, I think generally share that concern. Some initial analysis that sort of third-party groups have done suggests that very few, particularly public institution programs, would fail this test. One of the provisions in the law is that it only applies to program completers, not all program participants. So you at least are ensuring that you're looking at those who have earned the credential when you compare those with, for example, high school graduates without credentials. But yeah, there's a devil's in the details and a long way to go, I think, before we know really how this could impact states and institutions and students.
Any other questions for Ben? Okay, Ben, thanks so much for that really important and information-filled report. I guess we'll move on. We have, I believe we have Sarah Means with us from the governor's office.
Yes, yes. Hi, Chair. I'm here.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. So I know I'm on the agenda for updates today. We're really just going to use this as an opportunity to introduce myself to all of you. Ben did a really thorough job of some updates, and I'll touch on a little bit that. But I wanted to introduce myself because I am new in this role. I think it's actually been a month today. So still trying to get my feet under me, so to speak. But again, Sarah Means, I'm Governor's Workforce, Higher Ed, and Economic Development Advisor. You're accustomed to seeing Sarah Foster on these calls. Sarah had a great opportunity over at the Employment Department that she couldn't pass up, and so so she has transitioned into that new role, and I am here now. I've been in the governor's office for a couple of years. I've been serving as governor's semiconductor manager for the last 2 years, implementing the CHIPS program, the Oregon CHIPS program. But really, all that to say, my experience is about 23, 24 years in public service here in the state of Oregon, mostly focused on community and economic development. So that's certainly what I'm most comfortable with. And frankly, what excites me the most when I'm talking with Ben and others over at the agency is the real sort of desire to connect into economic development. And certainly I'm having those conversations with the Business Oregon, the state's economic development agency, and there's individuals over there excited in their strategy work to connect in with workforce and higher ed. So I think there's a really great opportunity here, a moment in time to make some of those connections. And frankly, I think it's needed given referencing some of the talking points that Ben had around challenging funding and budget climates, right? We're really going to need to have some of that cross-agency coordination to really maximize and leverage the work of each other. So I'm excited for this opportunity. I'm excited to get to know all of you more and continuing working with Ben and leadership and staff over at the agency. So all of that to say, not a lot of updates. Ben, frankly, did a really thorough job. I was able, I think, to catch most of what he was updating you all on. I just want you all to know that I'm working closely with Ben and others at the HECC, around sort of needs and items coming out of the 2025 session that need to be addressed going into the 2026 short session. So we've got our eye on the prize there and working to support the agency and their efforts, moving into February. Also, a lot has been referenced going on in the federal space around HR 1, the reconciliation and other sort of challenges and opportunities, if you will, coming out of the federal government right now as it relates to higher ed. So again, Ben referenced a number of those, so I won't belabor the points, but just wanted you to know that we are tracking all of that and doing our best to support the agency as necessary and appropriate in those efforts. So I will leave it at that. I'm happy to answer any questions, but really just appreciate the time and the opportunity to introduce myself and looking forward to working with all of you in the future.
Well, thank you, Sarah, for the introduction. We welcome you, and we've always seen a connection between economic development and education, higher education, and perhaps this is an opportunity to call more attention or to make that more identifiable. So I really appreciate the background that you bring to this and look forward to many opportunities to work together. So any questions for Sarah? Well, thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you.
I believe we're moving on to public testimony. Lisa, I think we have 2 people signed up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kevin
Who's
Carr.
first?
Kevin Carr from Pacific University.
Okay.
Thank you.
Kevin, are you? Oh,
I am. Thank you. Should I just start?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Chair Hammond, Vice Chair Simnett, Executive Director Cannon, and members of the Commission. My name is Kevin Carr of Pacific University and current president of the Oregon Association of Colleges of Teacher education. I've been preparing teachers in Oregon since 1998 and have developed and accredited many new teacher preparation degrees and programs during that time, including a Bachelor of Education program specifically designed for community college transfer students. I'm here on behalf of OACTE to provide feedback about the proposed Bachelor of Applied Science in Education program, which I'll just call BASE from now on, Bachelor of Applied Science in Education, currently being considered by the Commission. Just as a reminder, OACTE is a consortium of 14 public and independent educator preparation providers across Oregon. And I want to point out that we share and support the program's stated goal of expanding access to teacher licensure, especially to bilingual, rural, and diverse educators, and empower local communities by cultivating educators who reflect Oregon's increasingly diverse K-12 student population. So that's from their proposal. We support that inherently in what we do. In fact, our EPPs already offer a wide range of flexible and community-based licensure programs that align with that mission. So part of my reason for being here is to reiterate the point that we offer programs that do this. Many of our programs are delivered online. They're embedded in school settings. They're intentionally and structured to allow candidates to remain employed in their local communities, et cetera. Now, it wasn't always the case. 20 years ago, that was not the case, but it's definitely the case now. Some EPPs actually even serve community college students exclusively. So we have some programs that are demonstrating a 2-year completion rate of around 90% from community colleges, that they were developed from the ground up as being connected to community college students, and all the students are transfer students. So we have programs with a proven track record, and we also value and maintain partnerships with our community colleges, grounded in years of successful collaboration. These partnerships have taught us a great deal about community college students. We still have a lot to learn in the 4 years, obviously, but we're here to continue to grow and learn together. So just to summarize, we take seriously the fact that there are still community college students in Oregon who aren't accessing the educator preparation pathways. We hear that call. But rather than investing our limited public resources in developing a new and parallel system within the community colleges, OACTE strongly recommends that we build on our collective experience and infrastructure. We have things to build on that if we empowered those things, we could meet this need. So we wanted to strategically deepen and expand these partnerships to include high quality pathways for all community college students. And with that, I thank you and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Kevin, thank you very much for your information report. Any questions for Kevin? Well, I think you've been very concise. I do like your focus on how do we use existing resources and collaboratively expand educational opportunity as a result. I appreciate it much. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Lisa, who do we have next?
Abby Lee from the Oregon
Okay.
Community College Association.
Fantastic.
Summit, can you hear me?
There you are. Yes.
Am I there? Chair Heeman, Vice Chair Stimmett, Director Cannon, it is really good to be with you today. I appreciate the opportunity to give you kind of a brief update of what community colleges are working on. And I'm just making sure my technology is working. Can you see me?
I hear you fine.
Okay. Great. I appreciate the comments that were just shared with you about the BAS, and we look forward also to those continuing conversations and opportunities to build on what we're working on. We also appreciate the heightened awareness of the need in our communities. And I want to echo the appreciation that we shared yesterday, and I don't know if you got to hear from most of our presidents, but we were really so pleased with the Funding and Achievement Subcommittee report, and really the collaboration that we had with Director Cannon, CCWD Director Llewellyn and Jim Pinkard. This has been very much an iterative process and very much a collaborative process. So we appreciate that and look forward to more opportunities to work on that. Briefly, Director Cannon gave you a lot of information about what we are grappling with on the federal space. And we still are watching to see how those impacts are going to kind of roll out when we're thinking about some of the most vulnerable populations that we work with. So we will keep you posted, but deep appreciation to CCWD Director Llewellyn for her on the ground resources and efforts to help protect Title II funding as much as we could. And we believe we have just kind of a brief reprieve on that. A couple just things that we are working on. Our presidents met with Director Cannon this summer, just last week, actually. You're going to hear a lot of information and receive a lot of information on this dual credit parity. So yeah, just as expected, we have a number of superintendents that are going to reach out and share why we believe that OAR should be repealed, and we look forward to working with you on that. Finally, we had an exciting event this summer. If you are looking for some good news, look up what President Tim Cook has done in our Running for Oregon Community College students. And Director Cannon ran over 60 miles with him, and that was incredible. That fundraiser is still going on through the end of the month, so if anyone's so inclined, that really highlights the need for our student basic needs and those wraparound services that make it so important for our students to be able to complete things. So finally, enrollment is up across the state. It's a slice in time, so there's still, as Chair Heyman knows, there's still a few more weeks to go, but we are really excited about students coming back and taking opportunities to help build our workforce and their goals. So with that, I am happy to stand for questions.
Abby, thank you so much for your update. I want to return the thanks. I think that the leadership and cooperation that your community college people contributed to the work on the sustainability report was just fantastic, and it's really what made it possible. So I mentioned that yesterday, but I want to pass it on again. Just the great level of collaboration that went around doing something that was hard to do, and I think we all think it was a learning experience. And it's the first time around, and we'll learn a lot now and move forward with it. So thank you to people in the community colleges that I think helped make that possible. So any other questions for Abby? Well, thank you so much for your time with us.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to move on to I believe that was the last one, right, Lisa?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mr. Chair, if we could just confirm that there isn't anybody else who's would like to provide public testimony, it would be great if we give anybody who's. And if I realize that not everybody may have the option of they may not have the permissions to make themselves heard. So maybe this is also a point we can note. If you would like to provide public testimony, please contact Lisa Grisham, and that information is on the agenda. Or if you have access to the chat, you could indicate your interest there. And if we don't have that now, Mr. Chair, but if somebody does indicate that, we can try to come back to them later in the meeting.
Ben, thanks so much for reminding me of that. We want to make sure if there are people who want to provide public comment, we want to make sure that we create time and opportunity for that. So thank you so much. We're moving on to item 5.0. There are a series of community college program approvals. This is a consent agenda. So I guess the first question, is there anyone who would want to remove one of those from the consent agenda for discussion? And if not, would somebody make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Commissioner Devlin. Thank you for the second. Commissioner Simnett. Any more conversation? I'll ask for a vote. All in favor of approving the consent agenda?
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. We're now to Kyle Thomas and his legislative report. Kyle, are you with us? We're a little early, but I'm just checking.
Yes, Commissioner Heyman, I'm here.
Oh, great.
So I'll give a recap of the 2025 legislative session, cover just one or two items from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act OB3 is what I'll call it from here on out, that Ben did not cover, and maybe just talk a moment about planning for the 2027 legislative session. So there's no way around it. This was a challenging legislative session. As was predicted at the start, legislators did not have very much in the way of available revenue to make significant new investments in most areas across the state enterprise. And things were really so challenging that legislators left Salem with two major pieces of unfinished business. The first is a transportation investment package necessary to avoid layoffs at the Oregon Department of Transportation, although that's likely to be addressed at a special session, I think, on August 29th. Legislators also failed to come up with a permanent funding solution for at least a portion of the state's increasing wildfire prevention, firefighting, and recovery costs. This lack of available revenue was not a uniquely Oregon problem this year. As I sit in my hotel room in Minneapolis talking with colleagues from across the country, it really does seem to be only a minority of states that had the economic and fiscal conditions that were required to make new investments in higher education and workforce in 2025. We're also looking with one wary eye towards the August revenue forecast that will come out later this month, which will be a very early indicator to help us understand whether or not it's likely that significant adjustments might need to be made during the upcoming short session. We've talked about the result of those conditions in a largely current service level budget. I'll just remind the Commission of a couple of the positive departures from that budget, and that is the first. Despite not agreeing to a wildfire package, the legislature did manage to allocate $5 million in one-time funding to the Oregon Conservation Corps. This is the program that provides young adults with the opportunity to get paid work experience doing fire mitigation and fuels reduction activities. This was on the final list of initiatives for funding if a wildfire package was agreed to at $10 million for the biennium. But the $5 million received at least allows a portion of the program to continue while further discussions are held. And the second significant departure is the restoration of funding for the permanent benefit navigator positions at each campus, funded directly outside of the funding formula. As usual, the legislature was able to be pretty generous with capital construction investments, providing $120 million for deferred maintenance needs at public universities, as well as $320 million in additional investments for other public university projects, plus $36 million in funding for community college projects. Importantly for the colleges, the legislature also raised the future statutory cap on the value of community college projects, allowing colleges to now request up to $12 million in matching bond funds per project. This is a 50% increase over the prior cap, and one that was probably overdue given the increases in construction costs. The colleges, however, were not able to convince legislators to index the cap to future cost increases. On the policy side, where I'll spend most of my time today, legislators did manage to make a number of incremental changes, but were largely unable to establish any new initiatives. So in the category of affordability, legislators adopted Senate Bill 798. This bill qualifies active Oregon National Guard members who are residents of another state, as well as their spouses and dependents, for in-state tuition at Oregon's public universities. They also passed House Bill 2586. This is a bill that adds asylum seekers to the classes of non-citizen individuals that are entitled to in-state tuition at Oregon public universities. And legislators also added OHSU to the list of universities in Oregon where not just asylum seekers, but asylees, refugees, and other special immigrant visa holders can receive an exemption from paying non-resident tuition and fees. They adopted House Bill 3025. That was a HECC introduced bill. That bill removes the shared responsibility model from the state's Oregon Opportunity Grant statutes, and that was an unused mechanism for cost sharing between the federal financial aid, state financial aid, students and families that was implemented at that program's. It was implemented a couple decades ago. This change allows HECC to maintain a modern financial aid awarding model by agency rule. That bill also removed tuition equity requirements as a criteria for qualifying for the Oregon Opportunity Grant, and that requirement created an unintended barrier to accessing the grant for certain non-citizen Oregon residents who are already eligible for all other state grant awards. That bill also allows HECC to expand enrollment level eligibility or tailor enrollment level eligibility and funding to students that are enrolled at quarter time and 3/4 time, as opposed to just awarding students for half or full-time attendance. And it finally expands the opportunity grant to learners that are enrolled in certificate programs and other non-degree programs at Oregon public institutions and other eligible Oregon-based private nonprofit institutions. That last change is significant, and it's accompanied by the related change in federal Pell Grant eligibility adopted as part of OB3 that allows Pell dollars to be used for shorter-term workforce-oriented credentials. As Ben mentioned, that law places upon state governors the responsibility to approve certain non-degree programs for eligibility, provided they meet some minimum criteria that are established in OB3, as well as federal regulations that the U.S. Department of Education is aiming to adopt by next summer. Our state law allows the commission to implement OOG-related non-degree eligibility in fall 2027, so that we can spend some additional time if we think it's necessary, both to make sure that our systems and institutional systems are ready to go, but also that we can find some synergy between the state and federal policy where that makes sense to do so. These changes will be a pretty major implementation effort that will begin shortly once planning is complete. Lastly, in the affordability category, legislators adopted House Bill 3026. This was another HECC bill, a few sections of which changed the reference to diversity within the Oregon Teacher Scholars Program. Eligible candidates for that program must now demonstrate their experience with diverse populations, as opposed to demonstrating the possession of their own diversity characteristics. Renewal students will be eligible to receive the grant under the prior rules until their eligibility expires. In access-related legislation, House Bill 2421 was adopted. This expands the direct admissions program that we administer to include Oregon private institutions if those institutions agree to participate in the program. In workforce development, legislators passed House Bill 2024. This is not a bill that's related to HECC, but to the Oregon Health Authority. OHA gained the ability to award grants to eligible entities with the goal of improving recruitment and retention of behavioral health care providers. Those grantee organizations can use those funds to provide scholarships to undergraduate and graduate students entering the behavioral health care field. And those funds can also be used for loan forgiveness and repayment incentives, tuition assistance, and stipends for enrolled students. On governance and operations, legislators passed a number of items, starting with House Bill 3026. Section 1 of that bill exempts transfer council subcommittees that deal with academic matters from public meeting law. Section 2 of that bill makes exemptions to the requirement that certain transfer council subcommittees have equal representation between community colleges and public universities, only in the cases where the program mix across those institutional sectors is not practical to maintaining subcommittees of equal balance. Section 3 and 4 of that bill gave HECC procurement authority that's independent of the Department of Administrative Services and on par with other large state agencies, something that has bared fixing for a while as we've grown into an increasingly large state department. House Bill 3027. This bill granted HECC the authority to seek injunctions in circuit court to aid the agency in achieving compliance with state law and regulation by private career schools that may otherwise be non-compliant and non-responsive to other lesser measures and attempts to bring them into compliance. Lastly, in this category of operations and governance is House Bill 3028, and that is another HECC bill that takes our Office of Degree Authorization fees for private institutions and moves them from statute to rule, and that will allow the commission to adjust those fees later according to a different regulatory process that allows those fees to go into force prospectively and the legislature to approve them retroactively once they're already in force. In reporting and data, the legislature adopted House Bill 2508, and that requires the State Department of Education to establish a new centralized student data system. There will be a member of the state longitudinal data system that serves on an advisory committee in this process. And I think we at HECC hope that the system will eventually support some of the important work we do, such as in the area of direct admissions, but other areas as well. We also have House Bill 3026. Section 8 requires HECC, in consultation with the colleges and the universities, to conduct a study about existing higher education institution reporting requirements and HECC reporting requirements. And that study will provide recommendations for improving the efficiency, the relevance, and the quality of higher education data and reporting, including by eliminating or consolidating reporting, changing the frequency of reporting, or adding reporting that improves the understanding of higher education outcomes in Oregon and gives better information to policymakers. Shifting now to OB3, so that bill was signed into law on July 4th. It's likely to be the first of multiple budget reconciliation bills we will see in President Trump's second term. Just a quick reminder that budget reconciliation bills are special bills that implement the federal budget and are exempt from the 60-vote filibuster requirement in the Senate, provided they meet certain rules. This year, the Republican congressional leadership altered the manner in which this bill was scored for fiscal impact, and that resulted in an unusually large bill that does significantly decrease federal revenue overall, and that will stress state governments across the board over the next several years. Ben talked about some of these details. I'll just address a point that he didn't discuss, and that's related to student repayment, loan repayment for students who already have dispersed loans. This bill eliminates the Biden-era SAVE plan, and it establishes a new income-based repayment plan for future borrowers that has less generous terms and could require payment of up to 10% of a borrower's adjusted gross income. It also eliminates economic hardship and unemployment deferments and limits forbearance, which was prior, students were eligible prior for up to 12 months, limits forbearance to 9 months in any 24-month period, and extends the payment term of the standard repayment plan from 10 to 25 years. So these changes are expected, I think, to have a negative impact on certain categories of students more than others, non-completers as well as minority and female borrowers, all of whom are more likely than other borrowers to have long-standing student loan balances. And then last, Mr. Chair, I'll say a word just about the 2027 legislative session and our preparations. At the same time, we're in the process of developing regulations and doing implementation work on 2025. We aim to start our 2027 planning earlier than we have in the past several cycles. And that means really getting started now. So over the next several weeks, I'll be working on a plan that gets us through the Commission's adoption of proposed agency legislative concept requests, which will occur towards the end of 2026. But we will start some of that initial idea generation work this fall. And I look forward to providing you updates on that as we move along. And thanks, I'm happy to answer questions.
Well, Kyle, similar to our executive director's reports, you've filled us with an awful lot of information. And I have one frivolous question. Minneapolis is my home turf, so what's it like there?
It is warm and pleasant, and I managed to avoid the heat wave in Portland. And every time I come here, I convince myself I could live here until I look at the January weather.
Wise man, wise man. Anyone have questions for Kyle? Yeah, I really appreciate your again, the work at the state level, but in addition to sort of helping us to understand the implications of changes at the federal level. That is something that I'm not able to keep track of personally, and I appreciate the guidance that you give us on that work. So I think it really helps us as we think forward about fiscal issues related to our universities and colleges. So appreciate that. Anything else? I'll get back to your conference, I think it is, right?
I'm going right to the airport, Mr. Chair. I'm coming home.
Okay. Well, safe travels. Thanks much. Lisa, let me check back. Has anyone identified a desire to provide public comment?
No, Chair.
No. Okay. Thank you so much for that update. We're a little ahead of schedule, and I think the next topic item is little long. I think I have that correct. And so if you don't mind, we will take a short 15-minute break right now. So see you in 15. Hello, everyone. I think we're at time for reconvening. If you are present, could you turn your cameras on so we know who's here? Thanks. Well, Ben, I look forward to your report here. Trying to make sure we have actually people here to listen. So think Richard, Commissioner Devlin, thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Simnich. Well, Ben, you want to proceed?
Yeah, I will. Thanks. Let me just get one thing ready here.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks. We're running a little ahead of schedule, just in terms of the balance of time in this meeting. It's possible that we will conclude the morning early. We're scheduled to go on a lunch break at noon. It's possible that we'll get there before noon. We likely won't reconvene until 1 o'clock as posted on the agenda, because the final main item of the day is really time certain at 1:40 when we'll be joined by other guests. So just to help folks sort of manage time. And I don't know if this item that I'm presenting now will take the full 45 minutes or so that is allotted on the agenda. So we'll see, but that's where we are at. So this item is an update to the commission on the efforts the agency staff are making to put your strategic plan adopted last fall into action through activities that we are beginning or changing in order to bring the agency's work into closer alignment with the priorities that you expressed through the strategic plan. I'll spend a couple of minutes talking about process and what I hope to get out of today's discussion, which I hope will become a discussion. And then I will walk through those items specifically and then open it up. It's the chair, you may want to interrupt me particularly as I proceed through the items or save the questions, comments, discussion until the end. I'm happy to go either way with that. In terms of process, so again, the commission, adopted a new strategic plan last fall. It's organized around 5 goal areas, and within each of those goals or connected to each of those goals are several strategies that you indicated that should guide the commission and its work over the next 4 or 5 years. I will put just a link to that plan in the chat so that you can sort of reacquaint yourself with that page that describes those 5 goal areas and the strategies associated with them. Early this year, the commission staff organized itself into small groups, typically reflecting multiple offices, kind of components of our agency, mostly non-management staff, operating under some support from members of our executive team, one assigned to each of the 5 goal areas. And those small groups, we convened and supported 8 of them, took on action planning in connection with 8 of the strategies that are on the far right-hand side of that strategic plan document. So 8 of the 18. And those groups, remember, between 4 and 6 people each of staff came up with a lot of terrific ideas about what the agency should do differently in order to put your plan into action. Those recommendations were presented to the executive team, including myself, over the last couple of months, and ultimately advised by the executive team. I and our deputy director, Ramona Rodemaker, have set in motion the work and decisions that I'll explain to you in a couple of minutes. This, as I said, from a process standpoint, that work to develop actions associated with 8 of these strategies, was really, we thought of that as phase 1. I mentioned it's 8 of the 18. So there's an opportunity and an expectation on our part that we will create additional teams of staff to begin and undertake this same process and make recommendations, again, back to our agency leadership, for as many as 10 additional strategies that we didn't cover in the first round. However, it also was clear as we reviewed what we heard from those implementation teams that, they covered quite a bit of landscape. And part of what I hope we'll think about today, and you'll reflect on today or subsequent to this meeting, is, comparing this list of activity that I will present momentarily to the strategic plan. What do you see as missing, right? Where are you looking for greater alignment between the action of the agency and the plan that you adopted? Where do you see the biggest need for additional work on our part to develop new activity or changed activity? I'll just note that one thing that makes this kind of analysis challenging, certainly for commissioners, even for me, is the fact that we do so many things as an agency, and sort of tracking all of that work, some of it very long-standing and therefore not described within this particular document that focuses on new work or changed work. Tracking all of that is quite difficult. And so this sort of assessment of like, are we doing something? Are we aligned? Are we not aligned? I think that would be challenging to do, certainly based just on this document that describes sort of proposals for new or changed work. And so, I may, in responding to questions or through this presentation conversation, I may note some existing activity that doesn't appear in the document, but is connected to, I would describe as being connected to and in support of the agency strategic plan. Finally, the chair pointed out to me yesterday in conversation that, the function of a strategic plan in large part is to help prioritize, right? We cannot do everything. We're doing a lot already. And the goal and expectation, I think, of the commission is not that the agency comprehensively undertakes all possible work associated with the goals that are in the plan, or, state work for higher education and workforce more broadly. So I welcome your feedback on areas where you hope to see a sharper priority, even potentially at the expense of things that we have historically done in that area or other areas. I do really value a strategic plan in helping us determine those types of priorities, not just identify kind of gaps. Finally, before I start walking through this list, I'll just note we're talking about item 7.0, so the docket item 7.0 and 7.0A that are in your packet are the, make sure I've got that right. It's just 7.0, so it's all within a single document. Right. That's what I'm referring to, and it captures some of what I just described about process, and then this list that I'll start to move through. Okay, so these items, beginning on page 2 of materials docket item 7.0, are organized according to the goal area from the strategic plan. So I mentioned those 5 goals: relevance, alignment, affordable access, belonging, and leadership. Rather than connecting these specific actions with specific strategies from those 18 or the 8 that we focused on, we, again, in reviewing this, we decided some of them really operate across multiple strategies. And so we've organized them by goal. In fact, some of them connect to multiple goals, right? So this is a classification system that I hope is helpful, but also doesn't reflect, the interconnected nature of a lot of this work. Beginning at the top and in connection with strategic plan goal number 1, relevance, we are working towards, with leadership from our Office of Research and Data, developing and publishing graphical reports that express employment outcomes, including average earnings by major and by institution. Our goal is to develop prototypes of these reports this fall, with a complete series to be released and shared with institutional leaders and the public within the following year. A lot of technical work and policy considerations, if you will, associated with the question of how to connect earnings to higher education and training. I do want to put some emphasis on the second part of this statement that describes releasing and sharing with institutional leaders and the public. We do a lot already in this realm. If you're familiar with our website and the data tools that we have there, it is possible for the public and to you as commissioners to access quite a bit of this information. I think we believe there's that it may be underutilized and that boards, institutional administrators may benefit from having from knowing more about what the state is able to say about the employment outcomes for their students. And so a sort of process for using this data and bringing this data to institutional leaders is part of what we'll need to develop over the course of the year in connection with this goal. I'm on multiple screens here, so I'm doing a little bit of toggling, just in part to confirm that nobody's trying to jump in. Moving on to the second, and maybe what I'll do, just to ensure that this doesn't actually become sort of a total monologue, is pause after each of these goal areas, and that may be an initial point for folks to jump in if they have questions or comments, and of course we can come back to any of it at the end. And I think you nodded, Mr. Chair, so I will proceed with that plan. So I'm going to cover a couple of the others related to relevance. The second one calls on us to work with other state agencies, with employers, and with education and training providers to create, update, or significantly expand access to between 1 and 5 industry-related credentials by the end of this academic year. This draws on work and conversations that we've had through our industry consortia that Future Ready Oregon is sponsoring for manufacturing, healthcare, and technology. That's done a lot to engage employers and connect them with our teams. And we see this as a really fruitful space for new kind of activity for the agency and, more importantly, for our colleges, universities, and training providers. So we've set this, this admittedly sort of arbitrary goal of 1 to 5 new or expanded industry-related credentials, put together a team that will, again, work sort of cross-agency, representing community colleges, workforce training, our industry consortia to sort of identify where there's the greatest need and what it would take to put those new industry-related credential training into place as early as next fall. Finally, this is in some ways more a result of new federal law than the strategic plan, but it does, I think, link nicely to this goal of relevance, particularly in connection with employment. By mid-2026, we will be responsible for working with the governor to determine how short-term credentialing programs will qualify for the new Workforce Pell Grant. I mentioned this in my report, re-emphasize it here. The Workforce Talent Development Board, the state's workforce board, is called out in the federal law as for its advisory role to the governor. We staff that board. We will certainly report to this commission as well on the process that we will use to make those recommendations to the governor for determining eligibility for the new Workforce Pell Grant. So those are several initial areas of activity related to the first strategic plan goal area of relevance. And with that, I will make a true pause here, see if there's any questions, feedback, comments on that.
Commissioner Simnett.
Thank you, Chair Heyman, and thank you, Ben, for this report and for describing the context and getting us started really thinking about the specifics of implementing the strategic plan. This is just more of a comment, not necessarily a question, but all of these areas under relevance are really like they're sharply focused towards workforce development and earnings and the Pell Grant, which is all great. But I don't see, in this initial list, anything that is more connected to contributing to the community. And I'm thinking, I'm just thinking about this document as, this document is a public document in a public meeting. And I think that, some of what you were saying earlier about civic learning and what was it, democratic engagement. I mean, if there are activities that are related to helping learners be contributing members to their community, they're around that civic learning and democratic engagement. Could they also be reflected here, or maybe there needs to, or could be a show that there's also a prioritization of thinking about the relevance of higher education, not just about workforce training.
Great comment, and it reflects very much some of the discussion we had as executive team when we reviewed these initial recommendations. The two strategies that we initially launched in this relevance section are two that are focused very specifically on the workforce needs, and so that's reflected in these recommendations. I share your concern and my in terms of sort of how this appears when it unfolds in a document like this. It's why, I noted that at the outset, that this document really doesn't reflect sort of all the activity that's either underway or in some cases planned that could be connected to this strategic plan. It's really a product of this specific planning exercise that we started within the agency early this year. And I think there's a future version of this document that builds out, and it does reflect some additional activity that's already, again, underway or planned, even if it didn't emerge from this specific planning exercise. So yes, and if you've got the strategic plan open, it's a great observation, Commissioner Sim, that there are much of this relevance. The Commission's emphasis on relevance is not just to workforce. We know that's important to students, it's important to employers, it's important to state leaders, but it's also about solving community problems, contributing to community, being engaged in their learners being engaged in their education. And so it's there's a whole area here that I think is yes, missing, and that we have some work to do. This is exactly the kind of feedback that I'd hope to get from the Commission. You're on mute, Chair Haven.
Sorry, Commissioner Martinez, I believe you had a question or comment.
Yes, thank you. Chair Heyman. Thank you, Ben, for this. And mine kind of goes into all of them and earlier discussion, but looking specifically at 3, I did want to continue my support of what Chair Heyman was talking about earlier and making sure that we're looking at early childhood education as we look forward in this. I think that access to higher education, specifically for women of color and other individuals who would go into that field, it's very important that we make that access easy for them. And then what also kind of fits into the other ones is making sure that we have stackable credentials so that we can move them up into actual leadership positions within the state as well within that industry. So in order to diversify the workforce and specifically diversify the leadership, I also want to point out that that's one that we really do need to look at across the state. Thanks.
Thank you. Other comments at this point? Questions, anyone? Okay, move forward.
Great. Yeah, I'll move on and we can come back to any of this. So the second goal area is alignment, and this really speaks to the strategic plan, speaks to the intent to better align Oregon's education and training systems across K-12 and within post-secondary and into the workforce through transitions. So we had a couple of teams working in this area and 4 actions here that we're proposing to take. The first relates to the Aspire program that our agency, through its Office of Student Access and Completion, administers. This program, Aspire, helps educate Oregon students, especially high school students, to become college and career ready through education, resources, mentoring opportunities that are delivered, again, largely through, not entirely, but largely through high schools, and drawing extensively on community volunteers who participate in this program, receive training from us, and are working very often in high schools to support students. There are also a lot of staff people involved, a few in our office, and then a bunch at schools around the state. And if you haven't checked out Aspire, please do so through the OregonStudentAid.gov website. It's a really impactful program that we administer. I think the opportunity here that we've identified in number 4 on this list is to better analyze and report on Aspire impacts, set clear goals for the program, and this could feed into a potential policy option package, which is a request for additional state funding for the 2027 legislature and governor to consider that could help to expand Aspire capacity. This is in the context of effectively a cut to Aspire funding. We had experienced over the last couple of bienniums significant growth in this program due to one-time funding that the agency received. With the withdrawal of that, the elimination of the one-time funding, we're likely having to pare back. We are paring back supports for Aspire schools in this biennium. And so this is an effort to sort of consolidate what we know about this program, better report on its impacts, set goals, and make recommendations to the governor and legislature for potential expansion. Relatedly, we have a proposal here work under number 5 to engage other agencies, the governor's office, and partners in the development of a proposal for a state level FAFSA or ORSA completion requirement for high school seniors. This would require a considerable partner, particularly K-12 engagement, in order to move forward, since it would, as it's described here, at least, be really an imposition on high schools and high school students. A number of other states, many other states now, have adopted some version of a FAFSA completion requirement for high school students. In Oregon, this could take the form of a state law, of course. It could be enacted through the State Board of Education, which sets the high school diploma requirements. in very few, if any, states that have adopted this type of requirement does it serve as a or is it intended to serve as an actual barrier to high school graduation. There are, in most, if not all, of those policies, opt-outs for students who, for a variety of reasons, may not want to or need to complete a FAFSA. But we've also seen in those states, notwithstanding the sort of non-truly binding nature of these policies, we've seen, in at least in some of those states, a pretty healthy increase in the number of and proportion of high school students who are completing the FAFSA. And that, of course, is critical for accessing financial aid. There's a relationship here, I think, between the direct admissions work that we're doing, right? Trying to not only make the admissions system barrier-free, but also trying to support sort of barrier-free access to financial aid for college, and just make that process for high school students far less burdensome and sort of barrier-filled than it is today.
Ben, I appreciate you. I was going to ask a question about that, but you've already addressed it. Just I think the obvious connection between this and direct admission, and the ways in which I think if we can sort of synchronize these two efforts could actually improve the success of both. And so I'm grateful that you called that out.
Yep, and really exciting ways of learning from other states. Tennessee is piloting within their direct admission system, sort of automatic connection to state and federal financial aid for students who are receiving those direct admissions offers. So we're learning from them and others.
One more question. I just, at least I have thought of, and I think it relates to one of our goals, the opportunity for some sort of state level coordinated collaborative processing of those applications as well. And so just,
yep,
it's not on the list, but I think that's, we might want to think of that more comprehensively in that regard.
Yep. Thanks, Mr. Chair. A couple of others here under alignment. This third is to work with a third-party entity, possibly a group of students. It could be graduate students. We're assessing now the potential to engage some current students in this effort, for example, business or marketing students, to develop a proposal. This would include scope and cost for a possible public information campaign to increase awareness about and engagement in post-secondary education, right? So I want to distinguish this from actually undertaking a broad public information campaign, right? Which may involve, costs, resources that we're not funded for today. But also think, in today's sort of fragmented, decentralized media environment, there may be, low cost but highly impactful ways to help spread a message about post-secondary education and opportunities and benefits associated with it. And we're excited to work with, again, a third-party entity to see what those opportunities are and ultimately, assess whether this is something that we want to undertake. Finally, under the alignment section, we are working with the Transfer Council and its subcommittees to advance the development of a common general education block organized around learning outcomes that would satisfy general education requirements for most, if not all, associate's and bachelor's degrees at all 24 public institutions. And this is, I would say, the sort of natural evolution of the Transfer Council, this commission's authorities under the transfer laws that the legislature has passed, and our desire to ensure that as we build these commonly numbered courses, students at community colleges very clearly know how to bundle those in ways that can transfer effectively and satisfy completely general education requirements at public universities. We've done a lot of this work already, right? The dozens now of commonly numbered courses signified with a Z that are fully transferred, the establishment of a core transfer map, which represents some but not all, satisfies some but not all of the general education requirements, plus the major transfer map work has gotten us a lot of the way, but not 100%. And so there's, I think, intent on our part to work closely with these faculty-led committees and the Transfer Council to move this to fruition around that common general education core.
Thanks.
And that, yeah, is my pause point for goal 2.
Commissioner Simnett.
I'm not going to promise that I won't have a comment after all pause points, but first of all, I'm going to say I'm excited about these efforts. I think they're a nice mix of like things that are really practical that will remove potential barriers for students with entering into college, but also some bigger picture thinking and thinking about how to get the word out about the possibilities of that are available through post-secondary education. I just had a comment about the proposal to for a public information campaign. I think it would be awesome to involve students in that. And this is just a comment in noting that some of the work under the belonging category is related to this. And, I mean, as that proposal develops or as people are thinking about that, I would hope that some of that connecting learners to college and career pathways and thinking about, what letting students or potential students know about that, about supports available would just be part of the thinking about what might be communicated in such a campaign as you're looking at possibilities. I think in my experience, students have amazing ideas about how to reach other students. So I think that's I'm really excited about that project. And I'm also really interested to see how the general education work moves forward in the Transfer Council. And thinking again, just about the importance of civic learning and democratic engagement, just bringing those terms up again and seeing this as a possibility of a way to get a sense of what is already happening through those Transfer Council discussions, and probably, hopefully, move forward in that space, or that's a potential space to move forward on that goal too. So just a couple of comments about sharing my excitement about these goals or these strategies. I guess they're strategies linked to goals.
Thanks so much. Commissioner Martinez.
Thank you, Chair Heyman. I have kind of a question on that, especially concerning the first two. In part of that rolling out, are there plans in there for how to reach the rural and specifically remote schools and making sure that they have that infrastructure to be able, if there really was a proposal for the state level completion requirement, they're really going to need some support in that and some kind of probably money.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good call out. Part of what we've been able to do with Aspire over the last couple of years as a result of increased funding is expand its reach into rural and remote Oregon. And if you, again, go to the Aspire website and see the reach of this program into every corner of the state and some very small and rural high schools, I think you'll be impressed with that success. And we recognize that even with that, there are still major access barriers for rural and remote students. Also recognize that working with a very small school and a small school district on something like a FAFSA or ORSA completion requirement, it takes a different there are fewer systems and administrative supports, right, to roll that out. That being said, and not to get off sort of too far off script, like we were also very struck at the way in which some very rural schools have enormous success in creating a sort of college and career readiness culture that supports a very high proportion of their students in accessing those post-secondary options. So I don't think we want to assume that rural or remote means, oh, they don't have the tools or the resources to create that kind of system and culture for their students, because we see a lot of variation, and some of the very highest performing schools in the state for FAFSA completion and going on to college are rural schools. So I think recognizing it takes a different set of tools and supports, keeping a focus on rural and remote, linking, as you've suggested, this Aspire work with the potential FAFSA or ORSA completion requirement. I think all that's just very important. And knowing that it's not one size fits all, and sort of culture and leadership matters a lot to it. Again, I am getting a little bit off script here in the K-12 world, but that is, I think, some of the lessons that we've learned from our work in that realm.
Thanks. I guess we move on to the next section, Ben.
Great. The next section is related to the Commission's strategic plan goal around affordable access, and we had one work group here, and it focused particularly on the third of those strategies. Again, if you have the strategic plan open, of supporting institutional efficiency. And so the recommendations in both 8 and 9 come really from that lens of how do we help our public institutions become, lower costs and increase quality through innovative models such as shared services and collaborative program delivery. And so there's a lot that could be said about the work that's underway at the institutional level in number 8 and 9 and activities that are already taking place. And the HECC is touching those, although much of that is really led at the institutional level. But number 8 refers to a couple of third-party analyses that the HECC and the state are helping to fund or fully funding, that are identifying opportunities for the expansion of shared administrative services. Think IT, accounting, HR, payroll, legal, risk, etc. So potential expansion of shared administrative services amongst public higher education institutions. Again, these analyses are being conducted separately for the community colleges and the public universities. We have been very engaged in helping fund and sort of set up those contracts. We look forward to drawing from the results of those analyses and the conclusions that institutional leaders reach from them to further sort of put the recommendations or opportunities that those analyses identify into action, and ultimately, I hope, produce much more in the way of shared administrative services across our 24 institutions. Number 9 is related, but really looks at this not in terms of those, back office, if you will, functions, but rather program delivery, both academic program delivery and programs that provide student support. And there are not currently formal kind of system-wide analyses underway, but there is a lot of good work emerging from, or that some of it longstanding, from community colleges and public universities on shared program delivery. And I think the activity under 9 will be to better identify those shared programs, shared courses, shared certificate and degrees, collaborative models for service delivery, and consider what policy options the HECC has to further incentivize the delivery of shared courses, programs, and services for students. And all of this, I think against a backdrop, no surprise to the commission of, of overall, and again, sort of decade-long enrollment declines and certainly very challenging budget environments, program cuts at some institutions that I think raise this really important question for the commission and for Oregonians. How do we sustain or expand access to great high quality options in higher education at a time of reduced resources, especially leveraging distance education and distance service delivery? We think there are some there's more that our institutions and we can do. So that's what's referred to under this these items. Yep. All right. Seeing nothing, hearing nothing there, I will move on to the single item related to number 4. We had one work group focused on the strategy, the first of the 4 strategies, specifically under the belonging goal. We have a really great opportunity and are moving forward in a partnership with Portland State University's Oregon Kitchen Table program. Encourage you to look that up. It operates as a unit, so sort of semi-autonomous unit within Portland State. Does contracted work for a number of organizations to engage community in solving problems, community problems. And in this case, we've actually been talking to them for, oh gosh, probably almost a year about a method that they have used to identify through an iterative and structured process of community engagement, identify kind of the key factors within, in this case, a higher education setting that stand in the way of full inclusivity, belonging, and success for Oregon students. Or to put it positively, the key opportunities, the key sort of levers that an institution or state policy can press in order to improve inclusivity, belonging, and success. They refer to this methodology as a keystone factor analysis. And it is really, again, a very interesting methodology and very sophisticated methodology for getting a lot of public input in a structured process to identify ultimately a small number of factors that by impacting those, you change the total environment for students. And so we're excited about this. There are some costs associated with it that we're prepared to fund and look forward to sharing the results and even engaging commissioners potentially in this process as it unfolds over the next year.
Ben, I wanted to comment on this one. This is a goal that is especially important to me. When I was working in a different role than this, and spent a lot of time with national groups trying to figure out how to address retention issues, the issue of belonging has always become a very central, if not sort of amorphous issue, but very central. I think one of the things we learned through that work was that we frequently have a lot of well-intended processes that communicate to students that they don't belong. We do assessment tests, and students frequently experience those tests as, oh, I don't measure up, or the college isn't for me. And so I'm glad to see that Portland State has an initiative that will help this. But I guess what I want to make sure is we understand is the issue of belonging is not subgroup specific. It is an issue that the vast majority of our community college students, and perhaps all of our university students as well, feel. I think that one of the number one reasons people drop out from college is not about their academic capacity to succeed, but that they don't feel like that this is a place for them. And so I'm just really grateful, but I really want us to focus on this. This sometimes gets missed in the metric of what matters, but I think it's critical and foundational. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Hammond. And I just want to clarify, and I know you recognize this, but I want to make sure I didn't mislead. In my reference to Portland State University's involvement here, this program, which goes under the heading of Oregon Kitchen Table, operates as a public service program at Portland State that does work with all kinds of organizations, governmental and non-governmental, across the state. That there would be no particular focus on Portland State University students here, and nor university students, nor just even current higher education students. I mean, part of what we're interested in understanding is for students or people, Oregonians, who may have an interest in post-secondary education but feel deterred, right? What are the factors behind that, right? What are those messages that we are subtly or not so subtly sending to those students? So it is really meant to be quite holistic in the types of people who we will be talking to and engaging. There will be, I think our expectations, there will be some incentives provided to participants in this process. It does involve a fair amount of their time. Some of the cost associated with this project is to incentivize participation. So we're not hearing just from those who have the sort of wherewithal, the time, the capacity, the resources to show up and be part of a typical, public policy process. This I think will be quite different from that. So.
I really appreciate that clarification. Again, I just think it's such an important thing that we need to better understand. And I see Commissioner Simnett wants to add a comment.
I just wanted to again express my excitement about this project, or this piece of the work. I think this is really exciting, and I would definitely look forward to opportunities for commissioners to be involved. I am also thinking that what might be what is discovered through this process could become then part of the public information campaign, or I just see really a lot of connections between this work and that work of communication. So I think this looks great, and it's very cool that one of our universities houses this kind of public service entity, and I think that's something to just call attention to in this public meeting, that are a way that our institutions are really doing public service and giving back to communities, in addition to being a vital piece of our workforce training and economic development.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Simnett. I have realized that there are 6 pages of people in this meeting, and I only see the first page. So and I know that there are commissioners that aren't on that first page. So if you want to ask a question or add a comment, and I don't see you because you're not on the first page, I want to encourage you to just break in. And I guess I don't want the technology here and my inability to organize the pictures correctly to be any limitation on your participation. So please feel free to interrupt me or simply enter if I don't call on you. So any other?
Mr. Chair, I'll move ahead. The final goal area is leadership. And you'll recall, commissioners, this primarily refers to the HECC's expectation, the commission's expectation, that we better connect higher education with economic development strategies led by the state or by regional entities. And the two items here, we had a couple of work groups here. The two items first refer to a policy change, and second refer to a kind of agency kind of operational change. So the potential policy that we would develop under number 11 would be for the creation of a possible workforce innovation support fund that would allow the state of Oregon through its partners to rapidly respond to specific workforce needs. Again, I think we've learned a lot from the remarkable opportunity that we've had over the last several years to deploy about $200 million of state and federal funding for Future Ready Oregon, and especially through the roughly $100 million in workforce innovation grants, workforce readiness grants. And that really, that has, that's a process whereby we've been making sizable grants to typically partnerships between community-based organizations, education and training providers, employers in some cases, workforce boards, to respond to emergent workforce needs with a specific focus on underrepresented populations. And while that fund will go away, we're with that fund going away. I think we're interested in exploring and developing a proposal for the creation of, again, tentatively titled here, a Workforce Innovation Support Fund that could allow the Commission to continue to lead in that kind of rapid response to workforce needs. Secondly, and more on the kind of economic development side, we are establishing an individual at HECC who will be assigned economic development. That's really a core part of their portfolio. Among other responsibilities, this position will work with local and state agencies, including Business Oregon, to connect employers that identify workforce needs with HECC-related programs and institutions. So this speaks really directly to the Commission's concern, and you heard this from Sarah Means as well this morning, that we are not doing enough yet to connect employer needs and economic development needs with higher education and training. And so much of what employers report to, we hear to state officials, is related to workforce. This position would help to ensure that we're hearing that, and we have the opportunity, presumably with programs and institutions, to respond and say, yeah, here's what we can do, here's what it would take, here's where there are gaps, here's where we might need assistance and support. And I think this is really about better lining up those communications through designating a specific person at the agency who will be tasked with maintaining those relationships. So that's a starting place for I think this the sort of larger set of work around economic development and higher education.
Was fantastic. More questions or comments?
Yeah, just Ben, just wanted to comment on what you just said about connecting that economic development and employer needs with what is being done at the university and higher education level. I fully support that, and I think that helps provide a more cohesive picture of the overall outlook for the state, and helps harmonize some of the governor's goals on how do we allocate funding, and how do we come up with a bigger picture for the overall success of the state of Oregon.
Thanks, Commissioner. Yeah, Commissioner Farada, I appreciate your stepping in an area that I think you understand well and you can help us on. So other questions, comments? I, as always, have a couple, but I want to give other people an opportunity. Ben, this is perhaps like in a much future iteration of this, but I think it kind of falls into item 12. I'll use the analogy of supply side versus demand side economics. This is predominantly designed around a demand side model. We're going to be responsive to needs. And do you have any sense that education may at some point play a role in stimulating certain kinds of economic development by providing a supply of educational opportunity in a specific area.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really important observation, Chair Hayman. And I think the strategic plan you adopted attempts to reflect both views that we have, a role in economic development through responding to employer demand, and also a role in economic development through creating new industries, through innovation, through education, through entrepreneurship, right? Much of which can be fostered by, or is fostered by, higher education. And yes, I think while it's not reflected in these actions, there are a lot of conversations occurring today. And one very important one of those that I was in was amongst the public university presidents a couple of weeks ago about how to strengthen the higher education's role in supporting economic development, and how to better articulate for state economic development leaders who are thinking about this, not just meeting today's needs, but creating and building Oregon's economy through growth. How to better articulate the contributions that we're making and are prepared to make. So I expect more on that side of the equation to come through this next sort of phase of planning that we'll do at the agency. I think it's a really important observation.
Right. Grateful that it's still in our thinking, so I appreciate that. Other questions, comments? I see, Ben, you have a couple additional
I have
items as
two.
well.
Yeah, let me move to the final two, and we actually are now probably back about where I expected to be in terms of agenda timing. So this item has taken up the time and then some. There are two items that have also emerged, and they didn't come directly from these teams that we established, but they're certainly informed. One of them, well, I'll save that for number 14. Let me start with number 13. So we are exploring over the next couple of months the possibility of bringing forward to the governor and the legislature a proposal for overhauling the state's statutory goals for post-secondary education and training. And the most sort of well-known of those goals is the 40-40-20 goal, but you'll also hear this afternoon from Amy about the related adult attainment goal. The 40-40-20 goal in statute refers to the high school class of 2025 and beyond. It was a goal set a decade and a half ago. So it may be time, and there may be an opportunity to really engage legislators, especially, but also other partners in a interim discussion about the purposes of higher education and training, the goals that the state has for that, potentially better connect that explicitly, perhaps more explicitly, to economic and development and workforce needs of the state. And it is, again, something we are exploring currently. Expect sort of by the fall, at some point, we would make a decision about whether this is a process we want to move forward, right? That process meaning pretty deep engagement of the commission, the workforce board, our higher education and workforce development partners, and most importantly, legislators. So I think we'll have a chance to talk with at least one legislative committee about this in late September during the interim legislative days, probably get some feedback then, and have other conversations over the next couple of months to inform whether we move this forward over the coming year and a half. The final item here reflects a lot of things, including the feedback that we got from these teams we chartered, these staff teams we chartered to develop these recommendations for action, that really emphasized, many of them emphasized the value they saw, that they experienced in coming together across from multiple parts of our agency to think about these goals that you've set as a commission, and these learners who are at the center, not in connections specifically to their office or their program, but to the to the goal that you have as a commission. And they saw a lot of value in that kind of de-siloing process. And so that helped to inspire me and our deputy, Ramona Rodemaker, to develop this number 14, which will engage a consultant to work with agency leadership and staff to develop a plan for the potential reorganization of the agency in ways that could result in produce greater coordination, de-siloing, and more efficient service delivery. We'd hope to have that plan or proposal ready by early or the middle of 2026. That could involve some, work with the legislature that develops our budget and sort of oversees our organizational structure and positions. Not looking to expand the agency, but am looking to see whether there are ways we can become more effective in how we're organized. So that is a project, internal one that has emerged from this work.
Thank you. I appreciate the work around the idea of sort of restructuring. I think it's, again, timely, given that we're working to structure our effort around our new strategic plan. It might at the same time create some opportunities to look about how we structure ourselves in order to achieve those goals. So that's great. I also wanted to comment on number 13. I am excited to see that on the agenda. I think we don't talk about 40-40-20 very often, but it is in statute, and it was developed with the intention of meeting what we understood to be or hoped to be the workforce and economic needs of the state. But that was over 15 years ago. And so it seems logical at this point that our understanding of our economic and workforce needs have changed over that period of time, and thus, as we work to connect our educational work to the economy of the state, it would make sense that we reevaluate what the metrics are for that connection. So I, again, appreciate your giving attention to that issue, and I hope we move forward with that. Any comments or questions from commissioners? Okay, Ben, thank you very much for that report. I'm excited by the kinds of things that we're working on at this point, and like you said, there will be future iterations with new strategies that layer on top of these as we move towards the realization of that strategic plan. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and I just would welcome if individual commissioners have interest in learning more about our plans or even potentially being involved. Send me a note, and while I'll be out for a while, I will get back to you, or someone will get back to you about that. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to move on to item number 8.0, and we just happen to be right on schedule again. Go figure. Strategic activity number 1 is reporting. I just want to call attention to this first report, Sexual Misconduct Reporting Annual Report, is a new item for us, and so in response to legislation, which is identified there on our agenda. So I think Rowan Frost. Rowan?
Yes, I'm here, sir. Yes. Good morning,
Hi.
commissioners. Good morning. Hi. Good morning, commissioners. I am presenting today. This is the second annual sexual misconduct report that's required by ORS 350-346. In this report, we looked at colleges and universities' compliance with laws that required them to provide certain kinds of resources and policies for the students on their campuses. This is different than the sexual misconduct survey is a separate item from this. These reports have to do with the availability of services such as confidential advocate services, cooperation and collaboration with local domestic violence and sexual assault agencies, and some policies that prohibit things like disciplinary actions and provide other resources for students on campus. And I am open to answering any questions that folks might have about the report.
Does anyone have questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Devlin.
Two questions, actually, just to expedite things. The first portion of the report, the one about reporting about resources, my understanding in looking at who has and who hasn't reported, which there are actually quite a number of private institutions that have reported, that they are not required to report. Is that correct?
They're not required to provide the information that I ask for, yes. It's HECC's obligation to make sure that the colleges and universities are in compliance with the legislation. So I had requested that they voluntarily submit information to me about their compliance, and the vast majority of them did.
Second question, when we get to the second phase of this, which is actually the survey,
Mm-hmm.
and I understand that process is going to start relatively soon. I had a chance to look at the survey and to look at the implementation strategy. Survey itself, the actual document that will go to students, is pretty long and pretty complex. Has there been any discussion in the council has created for this about what anticipated response rates are? And it's voluntary for the students also. It's voluntary whether or not they report. They're given the opportunity to report, but what's the realistic view about response levels that you might get?
So you're right. It is an extremely long and complex document. A couple of things. The paper version makes it look more challenging than it actually is. Most students won't have to answer most of the questions. The burden, of course, is on students who have had experiences of sexual misconduct, because then they also are asked to answer follow-up questions. So the survey will be offered via Qualtrics and via SurveyMonkey, both which have skip patterns, so students won't have to see all of the questions, only those that are relevant to them. In the pilot testing that we did, it took between 10 and 30 minutes for students to complete the survey, so we're hoping it won't be too much of a burden. In terms of response rates, those vary really widely, and they're going to be determined in part by the implementation strategies that the schools use. So if colleges and universities that implement some of the strategies that we recommend for increasing response rates, communicating well with their campuses, letting students know how important this is, implementing strategies that would allow students to ask questions and feel safe that their data was going to be protected and feel confident that their data was going to be used, those schools will have higher response rates. Nationally, it depends a lot on the survey. The survey hasn't, obviously we don't have data for it, but a lot, nationally, the response rates have been somewhere between 8% and 40% for similar surveys. So we are realistically hoping for between 10 and 30% response rates, but yeah, they will be fairly low. That's not outside the range for surveys that are administered electronically in general.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Other questions or comments? Yeah, I don't think I have anything else. I was wondering, I was looking through the report, just, I don't know if it matters to you, or an identification of those, of the people, so the representation on the group that does this work, and if that was appropriate to indicate or include in the report. I don't know. Do you know what I'm asking? Sometimes in other reports we see, who are the active participants in making this happen. and just checking.
I see.
So.
I'm responsible for collecting the information. So the Survey Council is not involved in this process.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I do want to the folks who did respond from the colleges and universities were extremely patient. They asked great questions. There was a lot of dialogue leading up to getting the responses in this report. And if I could just point out one other thing, I think where most colleges had challenges implementing the requirements of the law were in the availability of resources to them. Partly the prevention education is extremely expensive to administer and to administer well. That was one of the challenge areas that I saw. Another is that the local domestic violence and sexual assault agencies that the schools are required to obtain memorandums of understanding with and consult with have their own challenges. Funding is unstable this year, and many of them were not able to meet the needs of the schools. I'm meeting with some of the executive directors at next week, and I'm hoping to get a sense from those agencies what challenges and barriers they're seeing and being able to provide these resources to the schools so that we'll be able to maybe find some strategies in the next year to assist with that.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Any other comments or questions? Okay, this is an action item. We're required to approve this report before it is forwarded to the legislature. So I'd entertain a motion for approval.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the Sexual Misconduct Reporting Annual Report as presented with staff authorized to finalize and submit it to the legislature.
Thank you, Commissioner Devlin. Do we have a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand or something.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, we have approved this report, and Roman, thank you so much for your presentation and for the work that you're doing in this area. We'll move on to item 8.2, which is a competency-based education report. I think we've seen this a few times before, but this is this year's version. So we can move to this item. Charlie?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Heyman. Also, hello, Vice Chair Semnett and members of the Commission. My name is Shali Hodson, and I'm a policy advisor in the Office of Community Colleges and Workforce Development. And as Chair Heyman mentioned, we have our annual report to the legislature for competency-based education, and this is, of course, required in statute. I do have a short presentation that I will be happy to share with you. If I can find it among the 25 windows I've opened. My goodness.
Great.
Okay. So this is our report. This is me. You have the report in your packet, so I will make this quick and look forward to your questions. Okay, so today I'll provide an overview of competency-based education in our state in higher education, what implementation is looking like, barriers and considerations, looking at outcomes and strategies for collecting student outcomes, and then funding and policy recommendations. So I always like to start with a definition, and this is the definition that is in statute. I won't read it to you, but I will say competency-based education nationally and here in Oregon is really a spectrum of activities and strategies that sort of culminate in the gold standard of competency-based education, which is that open entry, open exit, accelerated pathway. But there are competency-based assessments that are part of this, and a multitude of strategies. So we'll talk about some of that today. And then, of course, this is required in statute, so just sharing that information. So, you know, when I look at this report every year, and those of you who have heard me speak about it for a number of years now know that competency-based education in higher education in Oregon is very limited. But it is also an important strategy, and it can support the education goals that Director Cannon spoke about earlier. We specifically reference the adult education attainment goal and this sort of method of education as a strategy to help meet that goal. It can help meet labor market needs and in its accelerated form, help people get in and out of training more quickly, sometimes more prepared because they can do the competency-based piece that maybe is required for an exam or a license up front, and then practice their skills throughout the rest of the course if it's not an accelerated course. So again, sort of lots of strategies built in there. And it can also expand access for folks across the state and provide on-ramps that may not otherwise be available. Our best story about competency-based education is through the Emergency Medical Services Consortium that is supported by our office, Community Colleges and Workforce Development at the HECC, and also the Oregon Health Authority. And this collaborative effort between agencies has really resulted in a major expansion in competency-based assessment over the last couple of years in this consortium. And this includes programs at our community colleges and Oregon Institute of Technology, or Oregon Tech. And so wide variety of programs here that are either starting to use competency-based education or learning how to implement it. And so this consortium has been at this work for a while. And if you heard this presentation last year, it was largely focused on this work. But I did want to let you know that the work is continuing. They're making progress. They're continuing to provide instructor professional development. And I think I have learned over the last couple of years in following this work that it's a heavy lift to implement competency-based assessment, much less a full gold standard competency-based education program. Some of the barriers that we see to expansion in our state and nationwide, frankly, is that there may be infrastructure or technology gaps. And so one of the things that the Emergency Medical Services Consortium has found is that not everyone is using the same learning management system, which we all know is challenging in any kind of consortium. And so getting all of those programs onto the same learning management system and using that tool in a uniform way has been a big support to their work as they've been moving through that, but that can be a barrier. Those things cost money. On to money, funding. Funding is a challenge in this work because, as you know, our funding in Oregon for public higher education is based on seat time. And in a true competency-based education model, there would be the ability to accelerate progress based on mastery of competencies. And our funding just isn't set up that way. And so that can be a challenge and a barrier. And I think that's one of the reasons that the emergency medical services folks have focused on just the assessment piece. And I say just the assessment piece, giving them a lot of credit that is a big heavy lift by itself. But but the funding models can be really challenging in expanding this work. There are certainly regional accreditation requirements and processes that are not a barrier, but are considerations as colleges and universities are considering competency-based education. Implementing it at a certain threshold can be a substantive change. And so just being aware that those are considerations that institutions need to think about. And then, really ensuring that all learners have access to these kinds of models and have the ability to progress at their pace, it can be a benefit and it can also be a barrier. A little more on NWCCU, they do require advanced approval. If an institution is considering doing this in a major way, there's a threshold, I think it's 50% of the program or more being competency-based. And then they do, of course, require continuous monitoring for compliance. Just a little bit on recommendations. These are very similar recommendations to what you've heard for the last several years. As funding models are being considered for revision and institutions are having that conversation with the commission and with the agency, thinking about how they might fund models that are less tied to seat time and what that might look like. And really thinking about where that innovation could be. And I think providing the flexibility for programs to find that space where it works for them. It won't work for every program, but providing them with the opportunity and the option to do a funding model that supports competency-based education is something that should be considered in those conversations. That, you know, there's an opportunity perhaps if this is something that was prioritized, that innovation grants or funding might be sought for something like this and used to expand it. There was some funding from the legislature a number of years ago for an innovation grant, and Oregon Tech took advantage of that and did some work. And so thinking about that again as funding opportunities come up. I think part of the challenge we have right now is because it's so limited, we don't have really good numbers on how what student outcomes look like. And I've certainly had conversations with the Office of Research and Data at HECC and with OHA, or the Oregon Health Authority, as they are starting to track implementation and student outcomes and whether or not it improves licensure or certification on their end. And so as we think about how we would collect data on the effectiveness of this model, it's a little early for HECC R&D to say, yes, we can give you data on that. But we've been talking about what that might look like and how we might compare, you know, the past model to this current competency-based assessment model. And again, that we're thinking about that example in particular because it is our most robust example of this type of education in the state. We do have some current technical education programs that offer open entry, open exit models. We don't necessarily collect data in comparison to other programs on that either. And so I think that conversation will continue as this becomes more widely used. Oh, the other thing that I would recommend is we've seen with the EMS consortium, there's a lot of professional development that needs to happen. Socializing instructors to the idea of competency-based education and how it doesn't take away from what they bring to the work, but just changes their role in the work has been really important. And then teaching them how to build those assessments has been a big lift for OHA. So thinking about sort of the on-ramp to implementing competency-based education is really important. And so these are the next steps are really kind of a repetition of some of the recommendations, but we will in the next year continue to track the progress that the EMS consortium is making, continue to provide technical assistance to colleges and universities interested in the model and interested in implementing, and continue to think about and track outcomes. And that is what I have on competency-based education for you today.
Thanks so much. Questions or comments, anyone? I have a couple. As you know, this is an area of great interest for me, and it's a challenging area because our educational models are designed around delivery, not learning, really. And how do we disconnect, you know, the outcome from the process of getting there? Which is really what we're trying to do in competency-based education. And yeah, with funding, you didn't mention financial aid, but that's in there as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of structural impediments to doing this, and yet I think it needs to play a significant role in our educational delivery future. So I'm not, I know I don't have any answers or anything at this point. I just don't want us to. This is a tough go, but I think it's critically important. So I appreciate for your continued work in this area. And I think we'll be making accelerated progress in the future, but it's, you know, I do. I appreciate you starting by telling us what all the impediments are, and frequently they're our own, they're structural. So any other comments, questions? This is an action item. We need to approve this report before it is presented to the legislature. So I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you. Second. Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? We have approved your report. Thank you so much for your continued work in this area.
Thank you all. I appreciate the time. Have a great meeting.
I believe we're moving on to Amy Cox for her adult attainment report.
Good afternoon or good morning, I guess. Sorry, it's afternoon where I am. Chair Heyman and members of the commission, it's a pleasure to be with you today. For the record, my name is Amy Cox and I'm the Director of the Office of Research and Data at the HECC. And we have in front of you two reports, one informational and one that is an action item. The first report is the informational one, and that is the annual adult attainment report update. This is an update on progress that Oregon is making toward its adult attainment goal. As has already been mentioned in this meeting, Oregon has two educational attainment goals. One of them, 40-40-20, which is aimed at high school graduating classes, as Ben said, and the adult attainment goal, which is aimed at Oregonians age 25 and older. The adult attainment goal, to remind you, is for 300,000 Oregonians age 25 and up to earn a post-secondary credential, a certificate or a degree, between 2020 and 2030. This number, there's been a lot of discussion this morning already, as well as at the conference that I'm at, around connecting post-secondary education and training to the labor force and labor force needs. This goal arose out of that exact connection. It represents the projected need for workers with post-secondary credentials in Oregon over this 10-year period. And it is a goal partly because that 300,000 number is about 50% higher than it would be if we just did everything the way we've always done it. If we made no special efforts, we would expect about 200,000 Oregonians to earn age 25 and up to earn a credential. Therefore, this is an increase, a significant increase, and requires significant change to make happen. The adult attainment goal also has sub-goals that are aimed at reducing the significant gaps in educational attainment by race, ethnicity, by geography, by which I mean rural, urban, and by income. These sub-goals are to cut the gaps in attainment in half between 2020 and 2030. We are now about halfway, almost halfway through the period covered by the goal. The report covers the first 4 years of the 10-year goal. And in short, it shows that progress has been slow. It started slow because of the pandemic, and it has not picked up appreciably since that time. I'm going to share screen a picture from the report. This is figure 1 in the report. These green bars represent what we would expect adults would earn, the number of adults in Oregon who would earn a credential, post-secondary credential each year. The brown is the additional amount of adults who have earned a credential. But this red line up here, that's the goal. So 300,000 over 10 years translates to about 30,000 a year. And this gray portion here is the gap that we have not met, which of course accrues every year, right? There is some reason to think that our progress might improve in the coming years as enrollment has increased in the last couple years since the pandemic, but it will need to rise much faster, at much faster rates, and couple with completion increases, not just enrollment, but completion increases if it's going to make up for this limited progress. Regarding the equity-related goals, I will say that progress has also been quite limited. On the one hand, educational attainment has risen for most groups, which is good news. But on the other hand, it's risen at relatively the same rate across groups. So the gaps have not narrowed, and in fact, in some cases have actually widened. So this is not a particularly happy news story to tell you. It's actually quite not a happy news story. But I will say not to lose heart or effort, because this goal remains more critical than ever. That is not only because continued projections out of the employment department continue to call for more and more workers with post-secondary credentials, but also with the fact that Oregon's population is aging. And so those workforce gaps are not going to be filled simply by high school graduates, recent high school graduates. They're going to require engaging and supporting adult Oregonians to complete a credential that they have started, or to return to college or university or workforce training of some capacity to be able to start and complete a credential. One of the interesting sessions I was at this conference yesterday was about engaging adult Oregonians and the supports that they may need, which are similar to the supports for many students, especially first-generation students, right? Many adult Oregonians are parents, childcare. There's a significant need for childcare. There are needs for basic needs. There are needs for a support community, the kind of thing that might happen if you're a recent high school graduate living in the dorm, but isn't happening when you're working 1 or 2 jobs and enrolled in school and taking care of your child. So with that, this is, as I said, an informational item, but I do want to open it up for questions if there are some.
Amy, I have a quick question or comment. We have in other reports noted that at least in the community colleges, the average student age has gone up. At the same time, the number of credits taken per student has gone down. We're predominantly a part-time population, and I'm wondering, our metrics for this are, are focused pretty exclusively on completion, which is, and if we have an adult learner who's taking 10 years to complete their degree, they don't show up on this data at the moment. And so I'm just wondering, do we have any idea do we have any pipeline metrics on, how many adult learners there are in pursuit of that degree?
Chair Heyman, thank you for that question. It's a great question. And yes, we do. And we'd be happy to include it in next year's report more in more refined ways. This year's report does show the overall enrollment by age group.
Right.
So it does show the slight increase in enrollment of community college, or excuse me, of any Oregonian age 25 and up, not just in the colleges.
Right.
But we also track how many of those students are in what we call a credential seeking cohort, which would include students who are taking on average at least 1 course each term. They don't have to be taking they don't have to be enrolled every single term consecutively, but over the course of a year or 2, that they would be showing that kind of steady momentum. And we'd be happy to include that.
I appreciate that. And just another way of maybe giving me a sense of whether we're making progress. I just appreciate that information. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. It also raises the issue of, for some of these credentials, which are shorter term credentials, the opening up for next academic year, as Ben mentioned, the short-term Pell Grant, or the Pell Grant for short-term certificates,
Right.
is another engagement and implementation strategy that institutions can use.
Great. Well, thank you. Want to move on to your second report?
Okay, thank you. So this is the action item. This is a legislatively mandated report. Actually, the compilation of 3 legislatively mandated report. This is an item called the Tuition Remission Report. It is something we present to you every year. It describes 3 overlapping programs that provide reduced tuition and fees at Oregon public universities. And you may recall Kyle referencing in his legislative update the inclusion of asylum seekers into a program providing in-state tuition. That is one of these programs. Two of the programs provide in-state tuition rates for groups who would otherwise not qualify as Oregon residents, who would not qualify for in-state tuition. Those are persons who are not citizens of the U.S., but who spent much of their childhood in Oregon and who graduated from an Oregon high school. And veterans, and in some cases their dependents, who are from Oregon, but who have just returned from military service elsewhere. So because they had been living in another state or country, they would not fall into Oregon residency requirements, which require you to be living in Oregon in the years preceding enrollment. There is a third program which provides full tuition and fee remission, not just in-state benefits, for dependents of Oregon veterans who died in their military service or who became 100% disabled because of their service, or who received the Purple Heart. Just to sort of recap what I said, because that's a lot, and that's a summary of the eligibility requirements, trust me. These are the three programs that we're talking about today. On the left here, there is a program called Tuition Equity, which covers both non-citizens and non-resident veterans who would be considered non-residents, right? Then there is an overlapping program passed a couple years prior by the legislature called Non-Resident Veteran and Dependent Fee Remission. That covers, has very similar eligibility requirements for veterans, but also covers non-resident dependents of them. And then the third program for called the Veteran Qualified Dependent Waiver, which covers resident dependents of particular veterans. So, like I said, there's a lot to cover there. The reporting requirements for these three programs are similar. And in fact, those are overlapping as well, not just in content, but in the fact that these two programs obviously have overlapping eligibility. And these two blue programs around veterans are required to be reported together. So for all of those reasons, you have a report in front of you that covers not just one program, but three. What we've seen as we've tracked this over the last several years is a few things. One is that the number of students who have been served by these programs has risen. It accelerated pretty quickly in the years ensuing their passage, but it continues to rise in many cases, or at least has generally leveled off in other cases. The number of veterans who are being served by one or another program here is almost 700 students a year. The number of veterans dependents who receive that full tuition remission has risen to nearly 500 a year. And the number of non-citizens who are receiving in-state tuition has generally leveled off at almost 400 over the last few years. But a note about that, the eligibility for non-citizens has expanded, as Kyle referenced, first to include refugees and special immigrant visa holders, oh, it just went out of my head just a moment, but their eligibility has only arisen in the last couple of years, and about 60 to 90 of them have enrolled in the program. At the same time, non-citizens who graduated from an Oregon high school and spent their childhood here, those numbers have started to fall in the last few years. So that's something that we're tracking closely. There are significant fiscal impacts. This is not just about the number of students being served. This is about the fiscal impacts also. For students and their families, these programs vary in the benefits that they provide, and students vary in terms of their the number of credits for which they're enrolled. But taken together, the students enrolled in one or more of these programs are saving more than $15,000 a year. So this is a very important program for the students who qualify. For the universities who have to absorb any costs related to the program, there are also significant fiscal impacts. But here we're not always clear whether those impacts are positive or negative. And let me speak to that for a minute. There can easily be students who would not have enrolled at an Oregon public university if they had to pay out-of-state tuition, right? So the program may make that enrollment happen that wouldn't have happened otherwise. In that case, the universities would be getting a net benefit, a revenue increase, because they would be enrolling new students, paying in-state tuition that they wouldn't have enrolled prior. On the other hand, students also might be enrolling, but would have paid the out-of-state rates, right? And this just makes it so much more affordable for them. In that case, the universities are losing revenue, right? Revenue that would have come from an out-of-state tuition and now is only at the in-state tuition level. So we express these impacts as a range, which is a bit challenging, I understand, to absorb, but we of course don't know
I have like
students'
10
motivations. Veronica, can you mute?
It cannot be that.
We of course don't know students' motivations. So that range is between about $12.5 million of potential revenue gain to about $19.7 million of potential revenue loss for the universities for those programs that are about in-state tuition. The qualified veteran dependent waiver, the one that provides full tuition benefits, full tuition remission for certain dependents or for dependents of certain veterans, that's only a cost to the institution because it's a complete tuition waiver, and that amounted to $4.9 million that the institutions absorbed between 2023-24. With that, I will ask if there are questions.
Commissioner Devlin.
Thank you. I'm glad that you explained it's in the report also, the theoretical loss or gain to institutions. I had a different kind of question, which I'm hesitant to ask. I think the legislature could have considered this, but in the first two categories where it's either non-resident or non-resident alien or non-resident veteran, once they've attained that status, for instance, in the Public University Support Fund, are they considered resident students? So the university would get support based on their attendance? Or
This
are they
is considered
non-residents?
non-residents. This is a very good question, Chair Heyman, Commissioner Devlin, and thank you for asking it. We did work with the Office of Post-Secondary Capital, Finance and Capital, Jim Pinkard, and with Kyle Thomas, Legislative Director, and with the institutions. And we do count those students as resident students. So that they are funded in the formula, yes.
Okay, so the institution, even though they're not getting non-resident tuition, they're getting resident tuition plus state support.
That is true. That is completely true. So especially for those students who complete, right? That's where a significant amount of that funding comes from, not only enrollment, but completion. So it's a very good point, and a point that actually we should make in the report, and I'd be happy to add that note in the report.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions? Amy, I appreciate your clarifying what tuition remission we're looking at, pretty much, ones that are mandated or implemented by state statute. They're a variety of other tuition reduction or remission strategies employed by our institutions, whether they are the rapidly expanding practice of discounting and then what we call talent grants frequently in the athletics area. Do we have any similar understanding or information on the efficacy of those programs with regards to student outcomes?
Chair Heyman, that is a great question. It is not something that we have looked at closely. We do have data on it, and we'd be happy to put something together.
I don't want to expand your workload. I just know that those are rapidly expanding areas, and they're critical in terms of student access. And we're watching the impact of these state programs on student outcomes, and just know that there's a significant area that in a sense is attempting to achieve the same results, but they're implemented at the institutional level. So I just wanted to clarify that. I don't want to create a new responsibility for you. So
you're very kind. Thank you. It would be, and I should clarify as well. We have those data for the universities. We do not have institutional aid data at the student level for community colleges, but for the universities, it's relatively straightforward for us to put together a trend line. I have to think a bit more about how to, because those programs vary so widely, how to connect that with completion rates. But certainly we can put forward a trend line and send that to you relatively quickly.
Well, maybe for future conversation, but I appreciate your thinking about that. Commissioner Devlin, it looks like you have a question.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to make the motion if that's okay. I would just like to make the motion.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yeah, moving forward. Okay. This is an action item.
Move to approve the report as presented with staff authorized to perform any final revisions, particularly the one mentioned by the presenter, and to submit the report to the legislature.
Thank you, Commissioner Devlin. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, we have approved this report for forwarding to the legislature, and we are almost, or 2 minutes late, sorry. But we're going to break for lunch. We have an hour, so we should try to come back at 1 o'clock, okay? Thank you.